Hello, hello, Eureka Whiskey Club members. Trevor here, as always, coming to you from an undisclosed location. I'm actually on vacation right now. That's why I'm more of my nice festive shirt, even though I usually wear festive shirts. But so I'm not at my home bar today, but I am at a bar. This is a bar here at my Airbnb. So super excited to drink some whiskey and talk about all things Sagamore. Sagamore is our featured distillery this month. So I'm assuming if you're on this call, you've already picked up your bottle and you've already poured yourself a nice, healthy portion. I know I have, but I'm on vacation, so I'll maybe have a little bit more than I usually do tonight, but got to stay coherent. So we are featuring Sagamore this month. Hopefully you've been able to pick up your bag. We do, as always, have a lot of great extras for sale. I did want to remind everybody, you do get a 10% dining discount at Eureka. I was on some whiskey forums, and some of our members had expressed that maybe they didn't know that, or they weren't told. But on your monthly emails, it does highlight that you get 10% off both food and beverage when you dine with us. Just let your server or bartender know that you are a Whiskey Club member, and they will give you that discount. So just another great incentive for our members. But not a ton of housekeeping. We do have some exciting extra bottles coming up for sale next month. Next month is, I'll say that for end. I'll reveal what next month is at the end. But right now, we are joined by Ryan Norwood, who is the master distiller and vice president of operations for Sagamore Spirit. I'm going to let Ryan introduce himself, and then I'm going to talk about some great prizes that we have to give away, and then we'll taste some whiskey and ask Ryan some questions. So Ryan, take it away. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you do at Sagamore.
Awesome. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks for having me, everybody. Yeah, my name is Ryan Norwood. I've been with Sagamore Spirit for about 8.5 years now. I actually moved out there from Colorado to help start the distillery. And prior to working at Sagamore, I was actually spent 10 years with New Belgium Brewing Company. I started out with what was supposed to be a 6-month internship as a microbiologist in their lab and spent 10 years there. So I love everything about fermentation science, the alcohol industry, and have really have a big passion for rye whiskey as well. So excited to be on here talking about rye whiskey.
Awesome. So Ryan and Sagamore have given us some great prizes to give away. As always, if you're joining us from Facebook or YouTube, and make sure you're logged into the account with the name that's associated with your membership. We'll pick some questions to ask. We'll ask Ryan the questions. Ryan will pick his favorite 3 questions, and then we'll give away the prizes. We actually have 3. Sagamore is so generous. Usually we only do 2 prizes, but Sagamore has given us 3. So the 3rd place winner is going to get a Sagamore 93 proof rye whiskey. Ryan shared a fun fact with me before we started this call, which is this is the first distillate that is coming out of Maryland, not sourced. Is that correct, Ryan?
Correct. Yep.
You want to tell us a little bit more about that specific whiskey in a short sentence or two, just to get everyone excited about these prizes?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is our Maryland small batch whiskey. It's 93 proof. It is a blend of 2 different mash bills. As Trevor said, this is the first one that is globally available, or at least even nationally available, that is 100% distilled in Maryland by Sagamore Spirit. So it's one we're really, really proud of.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Thanks. 2nd place prize is a Sagamore rye that's Manhattan finish. So you were telling me all the awesome barrels that you finished this whiskey in. So you want to share that with our team or our members here as well?
Yeah, so the Manhattan Finish is a fun limited time offering we do. We just released it this last spring, and this is a whiskey that's a 4 to 6 year old whiskey that is then put into separately ex vermouth barrels, ex cherry brandy barrels, and then ex bitters barrels, and then it's spent anywhere from 14 months up to 3 years in all those barrels, and then blended back together to kind of formulate the flavors of a Manhattan Finish. So something is kind of unique and fun, but really tasty.
How long? Just the bitters barrels to me is so interesting. How long does it spend in those bitters barrels? I'd imagine it's a fairly short amount of time.
It is, and we actually, when we first did this, we bought 5 bitters barrels. They were Fee Brothers bitters barrels, and we were kind of thinking, oh, we'll use a handful of these when we make these batches. We've done 2 or 3 batches now of this Manhattan finish, and we've used all of about a couple gallons of it. The bitters are so strong. They've been in there a while, but they add a really interesting kind of citrus note and a little bit of cinnamon spice to it as well.
Cool. And then the first place prize, which is even more exciting than the other two, even though the other two are exciting, is a Distiller Select bottle signed by Ryan himself. And this is a whiskey that won the world's best rye whiskey at the San Francisco Spirits Competition in 2019, and it is their port finished rye whiskey. Any fun facts about that?
Yeah, again, this was one of the only second or third finish we'd ever done as a company. And we just knew rye whiskey would go very well with port. Just the flavors match up really nicely. And we were fortunate enough for it to get recognized at San Francisco. So it is a really, really great whiskey and a rare one. We did it one time and have not ever replicated it. So.
All right. Well, I may be sending you a note on the side to maybe see if I can get one of those bottles too. But
for sure.
We were talking before the call started a little bit, and something I didn't know is you've been there since the beginning. Since 2016 when Sagamore started. Can you kind of give us a little history of your background, how you got into distilling? You said you were a former brewer, so obviously there's some correlation there. And then maybe talk about what you do now and your somewhat not day-to-day responsibilities, but kind of just big picture of what your job is focused on.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I got into this. So I went to school for microbiology. I went to Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I initially was thinking I'm going to go in and do something in medical school or pharmaceuticals or even food microbiology, but I wasn't exactly sure what. And my junior year of college, I got an email that said, the internship you've all been waiting for. And it said, New Belgium Brewing Company is looking for a microbiology intern to come in and clean glassware, pour Petri dishes, sample beer. And I was like, I'm 21 years old. I was like, I could be pretty good at this. Exactly. So I threw my name in the hat, and that was back in late 2006. And I got on at New Belgium, and that 6 months, again, like I said, has turned into 10 years. And so it was a great opportunity for me to learn from one of the best in the business as far as like the treatment of employees and the quality that they make, that they put into making their beers. I did everything. I worked in brewing. I helped in maintenance. I tried to learn as much as I could about the business and what makes it operate. And I feel like that then has kind of catapulted me to where I am today. And so I was contacted by the president of Sagamore Spirit at the time. His name was Brian Tracy. And he reached out to me and he said, I'm looking for somebody to come out and help me start a Maryland distillery. And we're going to focus on Maryland rye. And at the time I hadn't heard much about Maryland rye or didn't really know anything about it at all. But I just said, oh, this could be interesting. It could be a great opportunity. And he gave me a little background that Sagamore was started by Kevin Plank and his business partner, Bill McDermott, who were 2 of the first people to start Under Armour. And one of the things they did was they were very proud of Maryland and the history of Maryland and especially the history in Baltimore. And they wanted to continue to invest in the city of Baltimore. As I'm sure many people know, Baltimore kind of gets a bad reputation. It's either based on The Wire or crime, and so we've done a lot to try to shake that reputation and actually show a lot of the fantastic things that are happening in Baltimore. And one of the things that they did was, in looking to invest in a distillery in Maryland, they actually found out that Maryland has this incredibly rich history in distilling rye whiskey. It dates back to some of the first distilleries in the United States come out of the Maryland, Pennsylvania region. And a lot of that was due to immigrants that were coming over from Europe and brought their tradition of distilling. A lot of them actually were using barley and malted barley at the time, but came out here and found that in the mid-Atlantic that rye actually grows really well. It's a winter crop. It's usually planted in, October timeline and harvested in late July, August. And it's pretty hardy, and they found that it actually makes a really good whiskey as well. And so part of that was the bones behind Sagamore was that we want to do this. We want to kind of revive and put Maryland back on the map. There was one point, Trevor, when there were 44 distilleries in Maryland in the early 1900s. There were 22 in downtown Baltimore alone. And a lot of those distilleries were cranking out at one point in the 1930s. Maryland held 1/3 of the nation's rye whiskey, which is pretty incredible Unfortunately, a lot of those distilleries during Prohibition and then during World War II switched over to make fuel ethanol and never really continued. There was only one distillery that continued until about 1972, and that was Pikesville Rye. And then they were purchased by Heaven Hill and now are made out of Kentucky. And then at that point, there was no distilleries in Maryland until about 2013. A couple of them popped up, and then Sagamore was shortly after that. So,
and what's the I was reading about the history of rye whiskey. I think the state of Pennsylvania is mentioned quite a bit, and the water source being the Monongahela River. And excuse my lack of geography knowledge of the eastern states, but does the Monongahela run through Maryland as well, or what's the primary water source in Maryland, and how do you feel that affects? Are you using treated water? Like, is that obviously water is an ingredient in both brewing and distilling? So, how do you feel that affects the quality of the product, or is the water treated?
Yeah, it has a huge effect. Obviously, like that's the basis for all of the proofing when you're adding it. Like on the front end of cooking, we just use good old Baltimore City water. But when you're actually adding it to the barrel or to proofing or to a finished product batch, the water quality is very important. And yeah, the Monongahela Valley up in Pennsylvania produces some really great ryes and that are traditionally some very spice forward ryes. But Sagamore actually, we get our farm from our water from our namesake farm called Sagamore Farm. It's about 30 minutes north of the city, owned by Kevin as well. It was at one point a thoroughbred racehorsing farm that we've since turned over to making actually an agricultural farm. We did about 3 years ago. And there's a stream that runs through that farm that runs through a limestone shelf, a lot of the similar shelf that runs through the Appalachian. And that's really great water for making whiskey. And so what we do is we actually go up and we collect water from the farm, bring it down, and we run it through a filtration system and UV system to make sure that nothing's living in the water and that it's safe to put in. And then we add it to proof all of our whiskeys. And it imparts really, really nice flavors into the final product.
Awesome. And then so you mentioned the whiskey from Pennsylvania. It has a good spicy characteristic to it. Obviously, that's going to be in most rye whiskeys. How do you feel that, like you said, the rye in Maryland's very sturdy? How do you feel like Maryland rye whiskey differs from, say, rye whiskey from other states, or more specifically the Pennsylvania?
No, that's a really great question. One of the things we found was when we first got into this, we did a ton of historical research to try to figure out like what was Maryland rye, what was the base, what was the recipe, and what we kept finding was there is no single recipe for Maryland rye. There was no, this is the only way it was made. And unfortunately back then, this is late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a lot of adulteration of whiskey. So, adding rock candy or adding syrups or juices or sweeteners to it. But everything that we found was that Maryland kind of fit into this. It wasn't going to be as sweet as your typical bourbons, your corn forward sweet bourbons, but it wasn't as spice forward as your ryes. It kind of lived in this middle ground between the two of them, which to me makes it a little bit more approachable, a little bit more drinkable as well. Because, how many times do you talk to somebody and you say, I make rye whiskey, or I like rye whiskey, or I'm going to do this, and their first instinct is, oh, rye whiskey is a little too harsh. It's not my drink. And so one of the things I always try to challenge them is try Sagamore, try a Maryland style rye, because it is more approachable. It should be more balanced. And I've gotten a lot of people that see that versatility and really appreciate it.
Awesome. You take a pause really quick. I did want to mention something I didn't mention before. We are live on Instagram as well right now, in addition to YouTube and Facebook. Unfortunately, we can't filter questions from Instagram. So if you are a member and you're watching on Instagram and you want to ask a question, I recommend going on YouTube or Facebook. If you're joining us live from Instagram and you don't know what the Eureka Whiskey Club is, welcome. My name's Trevor. I run the club. And if you want to learn more, you can go. We had a recent post today that kind of highlights the Sagamore rye that we're talking about right now. And we do still have some memberships available in certain markets. So if you're not familiar with what this club is and you're joining us on Instagram, welcome. We're happy to have you, and go check it out. Maybe become a member and, drink some delicious whiskey every month. You get a new bottle every month. And most of the time they're barrel picked. So we're tasting Sagamore rye barrel pick today. We'll talk more about the whiskey specifically in a minute. I do have a couple more questions. So you mentioned the Under Armour background. Obviously Kevin, right? Or is that
Yep.
his name?
Yep.
Kevin.
Yep.
Kevin Blake had a lot of experience, starting this company and having huge success. Is he still involved with Sagamore, or is he no longer involved?
He is. So we were actually acquired in September of 2023, so last year. But Kevin still has a minority stake in the company because it's something he really cares a lot about. And our new owners came in. It's an Italian privately held family company called Ilva Serono, or they're well known for Di Serono. And they may have heard of them. And they came in and invested heavily in Sagamore and have believe in our mission and believe in our goal and have opened up an incredible amount of network for us to take this brand globally and to really get this in front of people, because as you know, there's a lot of whiskeys out there right now and it's hard to reach the right people and get them excited and interested in drinking your product. So
awesome. So obviously, like I said, Kevin has obviously success in other industries. Like, what, I guess, was his vision when starting Sagamore? Obviously, we talked a little bit about, highlighting the amazing rye that's grown in Maryland, but is there anything that he kind of wanted to set out to do when starting Sagamore? Like, what was the vision? And I guess now that, with the new acquisition, I'm sure that the new company is trying to carry on that vision, but like, has there anything that's been changed or modified, or, just kind of what was the Kevin's passion, I guess, for starting this company?
Yeah, I mean, it not too dissimilar to ours. He just had a lot more resources than we did. He loved whiskey. He owned this farm north of the city, and people were constantly talking to him like, "Oh, you should grow grapes out here and do a vineyard, or you should do these things." And he's like, "I don't really like wine. I don't drink a lot of wine." And then when he started doing a little more research and finding out that about this kind of Maryland history with rye whiskey, his first thing was, I want to put them back on the map. I want to make Maryland well known again for rye whiskey. And again, like I said, is to kind of fight back some of that negative reputation that Baltimore City gets. And his goal was always to continue to invest in the city, to create jobs in Baltimore City. I mean, our distillery is located in Baltimore Peninsula, just on the south side of the city. It would have been a lot easier to build a distillery out at the farm or in the countryside, and access to everything we need would have been a lot easier. But we are literally in the heart of the city, and getting stillage trucks picked up, getting grain driven in it makes everything a little bit more complex and a little bit more challenging. But again, that's his intention, was to continue to invest in the city, and we've grown. I mean, when we started, there were 3 or 4 of us working in a very small space, and our team now has grown to over 110 people, which is super exciting. And knowing that Ilva has come in and doubled down on that and said, "You make a fantastic product. We're really happy with what you're doing from a whiskey standpoint. Keep doing it." They hired us and invested in us because they believe in that vision and want to help unlock some doors internationally and in other markets that we would have done eventually, but it just happens a lot quicker.
Awesome. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties with the TV behind me. Awesome. So you guys only make rye, right?
We do.
So
we do.
I guess obviously a lot of people love rye whiskey. Some people, obviously, I think arguably bourbon would be more popular. I want to use that word sparingly, but like, what do you think the biggest, like someone that's not into rye whiskey that maybe leans more towards bourbon, what do you think the biggest misconception is about American rye whiskey, and how do you educate people on that misconception and get them to maybe take the step outside of bourbon and into American rye?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, is how do we educate the consumer? How do we get them excited about something maybe that they've never tried or they've been apprehensive about? And that's been our goal. And we achieved that through that balanced, smooth approach with our rye. And we basically make 2 separate mash bills. We do a high rye mash bill that's 95% rye, 5% malted barley. And then we do a low rye mash bill that's 52% rye, 5% malted barley, and 43% corn. We cook those, ferment them, distill them, and age them completely separately, and then blend them together on the back end to create this flavor profile that, again, we feel is very balanced. And it actually goes in the face of a lot of rye whiskeys because it isn't that very hit you in the face spice or a ton of heat. And that's one of the biggest things that we want to do is say, try it. Give us a try. You'll see the versatility because it's great, neat. It's good over ice. It holds up well in a cocktail. And the big thing too is continuing to push others around us to continue to make great ryes as well, because that's the unfortunate thing is sometimes if somebody is, I love bourbon, I'm only drinking bourbon, and then they go try a rye and maybe it's not the best rye or maybe it's not the most balanced rye, chances are they may never go back and try another rye. And so one of the things that we're finding though is we're kind of almost that natural progression for people that are like, I've drank bourbon. I've drank bourbon for a long time. I know bourbon. It's still my drink, but like they're starting to step outside of that and want something a little bit more complex or with a little bit more layering of the flavors. And I think this rye offers that ability for them. And especially with the cocktail scene, I think that's a huge thing. A lot of the historical cocktails were actually developed around rye whiskey because it holds up so well and because it mixes so well with mixers that are traditionally put into cocktails.
Yeah, and speaking of cocktails, we have a great recipe on the cards each month. This month, we did. Ryan and I were just at Tales of the Cocktail last week in New Orleans, so I kind of wanted to play along with that theme. Originally, we were kind of trying to do this called in the middle of Tales of the Cocktail, and then moved it around a couple times. But I chose a Vouqueret for this, and obviously a classic, New Orleans cocktail. And so you have the recipe there. The recipe does call for some cognac, but if you don't want cognac, you can just add more of the Sagamore rye and it'll still be delicious. So I just wanted to throw that out there and mention that we have that cocktail recipe. So we mentioned before that you're having distillate come out of the distillery for the first time, which I'm sure is, if for those viewing, that is a big deal, especially for someone that's been there since the beginning. That's a massive accomplishment. What have you learned along the way of that process of going from a source product to now a distillate? And I don't know how new this is, but and I guess, are you still going to continue to, I don't know how much distillate you had laid down. So I'd imagine you're still going to be sourcing a little bit, and then also, or are you transitioning all to distillate from Sagamore? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
How much time do you have on the show? No, but honestly, Trevor, you're right on. It's like, I wish I could scream it from the rooftops. It's something from the beginning, we have been unapologetically rye. And it was like, we are going to make rye whiskey. We're not going to make gin. We're not going to make vodka. We're not going to do these things that a lot of people, unfortunately, if they want to make rye or whiskey, have to do to continue to have a business, because it's very challenging when you're making a product that you're possibly not going to sell for 2 to 4 to 6 years from when you're making it. And so one of the things we knew was we were going to do that and make rye only. So we reached out to MGP. We were very transparent with everybody about that from the beginning. Was like, MGP makes really fantastic whiskey. We hired their former master distiller, Larry Ebersold, as a consultant to help us start Sagamore. And we started buying and contract distilling through them, making these 2 separate mash bills, but knowing as soon as we had our distillery up and running, which we opened up in February or April of 2017, we stopped buying any whiskey from MGP. So we have not bought any contract distillate since 2017. We've not bought any whiskey. And so at that point, we started making our own, but knew that we would have to take time to build up inventory, to be able to get to a point where we would have enough to be able to reach our sales goals and do all that. And so there's kind of 2 schools of thought when you go from contract purchase distillate to your own. Is you can kind of do the light switch where it's you switch and it's overnight and it's like, okay, that was them, this is us. That can kind of shock the consumer a little bit, and maybe they're not familiar with the flavor profile. And so we've chosen a second option, which was to start to blend our product in. So about 3.5 years ago, we started blending our distillate in with MGPs. And that was a slow progression. We started with 10% up to 25%. So over the last few years, we had gotten up to about 75% of our whiskey mixed in with about 25% of MGPs. And then this of our core product, that 93 proof small batch, is the first one of our core products that is 100% distilled by Maryland. We have released our own kind of bottled in bond, a couple other ones that are 100% distilled by us, but those are very small, kind of regional or distillery exclusive onlys. And this is our first one. And then our other core products will transition over in the next year. So it's something we're really excited about.
Well, again, congratulations, because that's such a huge accomplishment, and I know how much work that is. So cheers to you and everyone at Sagamore, because again,
it's awesome.
Yeah. So we're talking about, we're going to taste here in a minute, and you may have already tasted already, but I know I have taken a couple. But you talk about the different mash bills. So you have a low rye mash bill, still a rye. You know, it's I'm going to cheat here because it's on the sheet. 52% rye. Still has to be more 51% or more. And then you have the 95.5 rye, which is more in line with what you see rye whiskeys. 95.5 is really that, that's a pretty common mash bill for rye whiskeys. Do you blend? Are all your whiskeys a blend of these two mash bills, or do you have you have just the low rye and the 95.5 bottled, or everything you do is a blend of these two mash bills?
Everything we do is a blend of the two mash bills. That's not to say it'll always be that way for every single product, but so far everything that we have made has been a blend of those two mash bills.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the Sagamore Rye Eureka barrel pick. See it right there. Full disclosure, I have not drank this much of the bottle. I am here with some family who's upstairs. Hello, family upstairs watching me live, and they're all drinking some Sagamore. Cheers. I love you all. We'll see you in a minute. Yeah, let's talk about this. I have barrel number 20. So I believe we, as I can hear, there's a delay. I can hear them cheering upstairs. So I have barrel number 20. So again, if you're in the chat and you have a different barrel and you want to comment your tasting notes, that way other people that maybe have the same barrel as you, as always, I like to say tasting is a team effort because everyone's palate's different. I may not be able to identify something on the nose, and then someone says it. I'm like, oh, yes, that's what I was thinking of. Same thing with the palate. So I have barrel number 20. So my notes are on your card here. I get a lot of maple, leather. I do get some of that spearmint kind of like on the tail end, which is quite nice. I have to cheat and look at my notes from earlier. One of the things I liked about this was I get a good amount of cacao, and it has like a really malty sweetness. So I put chocolate chip pancakes on as one of my tasting notes. I've been a member for a while. I like to try to keep it interesting and don't have the same, vanilla, maple, caramel, even though maple's up there and caramel's not. But also about some baking spices, some fruiting like dark stone fruit, plums, cloves, cinnamon, maybe a little bit of allspice. And then it finishes very nice and clean. It does have a bit, I'd say the finish is long. This is 110 proof, I believe. Which all they are proof down. They are single barrels, but they are proof down to 110. What is typically like off of the barrel itself? Like, what do you? I know you proofed that because have you released many cast strength whiskeys?
We do. So we have a cast strength in our core whiskey that comes in at 112.2. But honestly, the whiskey so this is 100% MGP distilled. And the whiskey that we were getting from them was put into the barrel at 120, and we were dumping them at 108 to probably 116 on the high end. So we actually saw some significant loss in alcohol over that aging period, which we're actually seeing opposite of barrels that we're producing here in Maryland. We're going in at the same proof of around 120, and we're dumping barrels 125 up to 128. And so it's exciting to see those differences and what that proof change does to the flavor profile and its interaction with water later on. So even the ones you guys are tasting right now, like there's not much water in it. It's just kind of it's a drop just to help kind of open it up a little bit and help us keep kind of a single product line across all of our barrel selects. So
I love like just the leather on.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's great, and it's not like new leather. It's like a leather jacket you've worn for a few years.
Yeah. It's not that overpowering new leather where you're like, oh.
No. I love it. I think it's great. All right, so let's. I got a few more questions for you. So
Great.
let's actually look at the chat. I don't know if anybody. We got Eric Strickland says he has barrel 31. Let's see. Jeff Gunn says barrel 44, cinnamon and a little spice, some sweetness, cherry bitters. Said he's enjoying it neat and some with a small bit of ice, but he prefers it neat. Barrel 44 by Mike K. Definitely butterscotch and just the slightest hit of mint at the end. I get that as well, Mike. I don't have the same barrel as you, but they're going to be slightly different. Mark says spearmint. Wow, now that you mention it. See, that's what I told you. Someone says something. Josh Cessier, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, 62 here. Wade Turner says barrel 50. Mark Horowitz, barrel 44, butterscotch. So, continue to comment on what barrels you have. Andrew Bemis says barrel 31, maple, bacon spice, rich honey, minty, delicious. I agree with you. It is delicious, Andrew. So, again, continue to comment your tasting. Again, it's always fun to see what barrels people have and what tasting profiles you get. So, I will continue to sip on my delicious, cinnamony, leathery, plummy chocolate chip pancake whiskey. Let's see. I guess you've been at Sagamore since the beginning. Obviously you're proud of the transition to your own distillate, but what would you say has been your proudest moment or your biggest accomplishment in the 8.5 years that you've been with Sagamore?
Honestly, the team. We have an incredible team. Like nobody does this alone, and decisions aren't made alone. And we've been fortunate enough to build a very solid team of people from a lot of different backgrounds. We have ex-brewers, ex-vintners, people that are bringing their ideas and discussions into every decision that we make. And that's been the most fun, honestly, is you couldn't do it without them. We have a very hands-on manual distillery. Our bottling line is very hands-on. So we rely on people to show up and do their job and get excited and be passionate. We try to find that because that's what makes great whiskey is you can, anybody can go and push buttons and move things around and move liquid around, but to be passionate about it, to catch things, to be quality forward, you can't do that without a fantastic team. And, honestly, for a company that's 8.5 years old, I would say the tenure on our operations side is probably 5 or 6 years, which is pretty incredible. And it's something that I want to continue to invest in and make sure that they feel valued and that they help us and push us and challenge us when we get stuck or when you're making kind of the same things over time. You got to rely on your team to pull you out of that. So.
Awesome. It's important one of the most important things, working in, operations is you have to have a good team around you. And that's the most important thing. So that's awesome to hear you say that. Obviously I can tell that Sagamore, values its team, but from the things I've read and the vibe I get is that community is a big, focus for Sagamore. Can you talk about how Sagamore is involved in the local Baltimore community and things you do within that community to, further along the greater area of Baltimore and Maryland itself?
Yeah, community is very important for us, and not like a manufactured community. We want it to be very genuine, and it's been very grassroots. Everything from our events started out with 5 to 10 of the same people showing up drinking whiskey together, and now we get 1,500 that show up for events, and community being our farmers too. When we first started this, we were using grain brokers only, sourcing corn from New York, sourcing rye from the Midwest and barley from the Midwest. And one of the things we started doing back in 2018 was started to reach out and talk to local farmers. In 2018, some farmers had planted rye grain for some local breweries who ended up not taking the grain. And unfortunately with rye, the only subsidies that a farmer gets to actually use it or grow it is if they use it as a cover crop. So they have to till it into the ground. As soon as they harvest it, they don't get any money from the government. So they were stuck with about 36,000 pounds of rye that they didn't know what to do with. And we came in, we agreed to buy it off of them, but then to work with them into the future to plant rye for us, for grain. And we said, we know this is challenging. Rye is a protected seed. So there's a company called KWS who owns a lot of the genetic rights to rye grain. And so every year a farmer plants it, they actually have to go buy seed. And so we've agreed to buy the seed up front and pay price on the back end if they can reach our quality specs. And in 2023, we harvested 1.6 million pounds of rye in the state of Maryland. So it's something that we love, we care a lot about, and it's that community. It's people looking out for each other and building you up and understanding what goes into making a product. So
awesome. So is all the rye grown at Sagamore Farms? Is it exclusively for Sagamore, or are you getting people contacting you to purchase that for whiskey or other things, or is it just all the rye grown goes directly to Sagamore?
So we grow about a few 100,000 pounds up at Sagamore Farm itself, and we use 100% of that. We use non-GMO corn. We grow 100% of the non-GMO corn that we use in our products up at Sagamore Farm as well. And then the other farmers we use about 4 other local farmers, and we use all of it. If there's occasionally where a local brewer will reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for some rye, absolutely. We will sell some to them or give them some, because again, it's that community thought, and it's expensive. It's expensive to do local. It's expensive to do some of these things, but we feel there's a ton of value in that. And yeah, we use most of it. It right now it accounts for about 50% of the rye we use in all of our products.
Okay.
We'll continue to step that up, but it'll never be 100%. You don't want all of your eggs in one basket. And, if something happened or we had a major storm, like rye is not an insurable crop. So if we had a major storm, we'd be out of it. So we still want to keep our relationships with our brokers and make sure that we are getting the best quality rye that we can.
Awesome. All right, we're going to move on to song selection here in a second, but I sometimes ask this question, sometimes I don't, but I do like the question. So I think one of our members asked it before, and I always just think it's so interesting. Dead or alive, who would you love to share a glass of Sagamore rye whiskey with? And why?
Jerry Garcia.
Right.
I'm a huge fan, and I just liked his outlook on life and his positivity and what he brought into this world. And I think it'd be pretty wonderful to share whiskey with him.
All right, well, let's move on to our song selection. So that's a perfect transition, because
good segue.
Ryan is a deadhead, apparently. Yeah. So is that do you accept?
Yeah, guilty.
That derogatory? I don't know. I don't know how Grateful Dead fans feel about. I don't know. Are you good with being labeled as a deadhead, or is that?
I'm okay with it. I have a very eclectic. I mean, I like all types of music. I really love bluegrass and kind of country music, like older school country music. Yeah. I listen to a lot of Billy Strings. I listen to just Tyler Childers, things like that. But I also appreciate the Dead and some older things as well. So
awesome. All right, well, tell us about your 2 songs, and you kind of mentioned both the artists already, but tell us why you picked those songs and why they remind you of Sagamore.
Yeah, it's just a personal thing, but I thought, I was obviously getting on here to talk about whiskey and to talk about history, and both the songs I picked kind of have a little bit of a throwback to both. So I picked Brown Eyed Women, which is a fantastic song. It talks about a father that ran a still and made rye whiskey and worked really hard, lost his wife, and found out that sometimes it's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. And that's just always a fun thing. Like I said, it has history and whiskey, which are my favorite things. And then the other one I chose was Tyler Childers' Tattoos, which is just a great song. He does throw out Bullet Rye in the song, which is kind of a competitor, but he talks about whiskey kills all things in time. And that always resonates with me, because it's like the good, the bad, the pain, whatever it is, whiskey always helps.
Awesome. My song choices, I chose Zach Bryan, Great American Bar Scene, from his new album. Kind of being at Tales last week, being with Sagamore, I kind of just felt like the perfect song choice. Amazing album by Zach Bryan.
Great one.
And then I chose a song by an artist called Vacationer, and the song is called Paradise Waiting, because I am on vacation and paradise is waiting for me. So that's why I chose that one. So I'm going to enjoy some Sagamore while I'm on vacation in paradise. So
I can attest to Trevor's view right now. It definitely is paradise. So.
Oh yeah, it's sorry. I don't mean this as a brag, but there we go. First vacation of the year, so definitely needed. Lastly, before we get into our members' questions, just anything new and exciting that you'd like to share or tell our members about that's coming up from Sagamore. Obviously, we talked about transitioning to your own distillate, but any releases coming up that you're particularly proud of or our members should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so a fun thing. So obviously getting into this, as I mentioned, we worked with MGP and did a lot of contract distillation. And one of the things that was a little bit weird for me was people were coming up to us in the early days when it was all MGP whiskey and being like, wow, you guys make such great whiskey. And it just felt a little awkward. And I was kind of like, oh, like we're good bottlers. We're good at blending these things together. But one of the things we've kind of built up a little bit of a reputation with was finishing whiskey. And so taking what was a really great base in rye whiskey and putting that into finished barrels, whether it's port, whether it's cognac, we've done tequila, mezcal, Calvados. And so those are all fun. And like I said, we built up a little bit of a reputation. And so if you have an opportunity, I would highly recommend to go up and pick up the Manhattan Finish. It is in market, should be in your market now. We walk a fine line with that one of it still being a rye whiskey, but also being a finished whiskey that has those flavors. But we also have this fall coming out, a 9-year-old rye whiskey. To me, about 6 to 10 years is a sweet spot for rye. And this 9-year-old is tasting really, really wonderful. We're getting ready to probably package that here in the next week or two, and that should be on the shelves in September, October timeline. So a really great showcase of MGP and what we believe is a Maryland-style rye whiskey with its approachability and where it kind of fits on that flavor profile and spectrum.
Awesome. All right, well, let's ask some questions. And we have the Manhattan Finish as one of our prizes tonight. So and my brother just came downstairs and stole more of this. So
that's a good sign, right?
Family's a fan. Yeah. So, all right, let's get into some of these questions here. So Mark Horowitz asks, what do the 3 diamonds represent on the label, and does the shape of the bottle have any significance?
Yeah, two great questions. So the 3 diamonds were actually a throwback. So Sagamore Farm, way back when, was a thoroughbred horse racing farm owned by the Vanderbilt family. It was actually given to their son for his 21st birthday. Quite the gift for your 21st birthday. It was about a 1,000-acre farm at the time, and they were really into horse racing. And the jockeys on their silks had 3 diamonds on it. So fast forward, the farm had gone into disrepair and was just kind of not being well taken care of. And so Kevin purchased that in 2007 and reached out to the Vanderbilt family and said, I would love to bring back the 3 diamonds on the silks and use that in my business and what I'm trying to start. And they said, absolutely. And so it's kind of stuck with us. It's a fun homage to the history of the farm, but also it's kind of a cool thing too on our side. And then the bottle shape is actually a throwback to some of the older bottles that were used in Maryland. And when we're doing that research, we found that, not a lot of Maryland distillers just used your kind of normal round bottle or anything like that. They were actually using quite unique bottles. And one of the things we wanted the bottle to stand out on the back bar. We wanted it to be something that people, glanced at, looked at, came back to and picked up, because it was like, wow, this is amazing. It's such a heavy bottle. It's got some really nice weight to it. I know bartenders are sometimes like, it's too big, but it kind of has that throwback to some of the old school Maryland rye whiskeys.
It's awesome. It's beautiful label, beautiful bottle. So you guys crushed it. Wade Turner asks, what was the hardest part of your transition from the brewing industry to the distilling industry, and what have you enjoyed the most about the change?
It actually wasn't as hard. So in distilling, you basically make a beer. So it's about 75% there, and then you distill it. And so understanding the concepts and the chemistry around distilling was the most challenge, and just understanding how to balance distill and make sure that you had the right feed and the right steam feed and the beer feed into it. The fermentation side has blown my mind from the beginning, because on the beer side, your yeast is so precious. The fermentation has to be so dialed in, and you're taking all these measurements and doing all this. And in whiskey, we've got open top fermenters that we're kind of shaking the yeast up before we put it in there. And then it's like, okay, go and do what you're going to do for 3 days. And so it's a lot kind of a little bit more rough and raw in the process of actually making the beer. But a lot of the process is very similar. And it was just that challenge of learning and understanding the still and then understanding the blending side. And then really testing my patience, because when you're making beer, it's like you make it 2 weeks later, chances are 4 weeks later, it's out in the market, you're tasting it, you know how it went, you know what changes to make. Whiskey's a lot more challenging, especially everything we do is aged at least 4 years. So it's hard to make adjustments or pick out faults or make things better when you're waiting that long.
Awesome. Yeah, we used to have a shirt at our restaurants that said, well, I know it said beer and bourbon because alliteration, but beer and bourbon, brothers separated at birth.
For sure.
Yeah. Let's see here. Matthew Archer says, do you think the colder weather compared to Kentucky offers a better aging environment for rye? Do you do anything unique to control the temperatures during aging?
No, so we're super traditional in our aging. So we put it into non-climate controlled aging barns. We age everything on the bilge, so we don't do any kind of palletized aging, and we don't move barrels around. We just let them go. And absolutely, I think the cold, that's what you want out of aging, is you want these really, really hot, humid summers to help drive that whiskey into the wood, and then these cold major deltas in temperature to pull that whiskey back out of the wood. And each time you're doing that, you're removing color, flavor, aroma, sugars from the barrel. And so we get, sometimes our barn
chips, right?
Exactly. And our barn in the summer, you can go up to the top floor and it could be 125 degrees up there in the middle of summer. And then you go in the winter and it could be 15 degrees. So I think that just helps to really force that whiskey in and out and pull as much flavor from the barrel as it can.
Jordan Racy says, what's your favorite cocktail to make with Sagamore rye? Sorry, maybe it was a Freudian slip. Is it a Sagamore?
I was going to say, yeah. Honestly, I'm kind of a traditionalist, but I like a good Manhattan. I think it's a balance. It's very whiskey forward. It's very rye whiskey. It works so well with rye whiskey that I like that. Or I even like a black Manhattan with an Italian Amaro. I think goes really well too, and helps kind of cut down a little bit on that sweetness. Personally, I'm a rye whiskey drinker. I don't like sweet a lot, so I tend to gravitate towards more kind of spicy or savory flavors.
Awesome. Who doesn't love a good Manhattan?
I know, right?
I'm gonna make one later. This is a good question that I should have asked. Does the name Sagamore mean or represent anything? I'm sure it does. You named your distillery that. So where does
it does. So the farm was actually called Sagamore. I think it is a Native American for chief, I believe. And so it's from the namesake of the farm, Sagamore Farm. There's also not related, but in upstate New York, there's Sagamore Resort, and so it's something that from the farm, and after Kevin purchased the farm, there's kind of been a lot of offshoots of Sagamore around the Baltimore area.
So I'm going to ask it, but I don't know the background of this. But Sarah Steepleton said, "Is there any effort to continue honoring the Maryland rye but incorporate Italian influence?"
Nothing that's planned. I'm not sure what that is. It's actually funny. We released our own Amaro last year prior to the acquisition, prior to anybody even knowing the acquisition was happening. It was kind of like we were excited about the Black Manhattan cocktail and kind of the excitement around bartenders and Amaros. And so we created Amaro using our 95.5 distillate instead of like a GNS or a base spirit. We used our 95.5 rye whiskey distillate. And it turned out really good. And it's our way of kind of like mixing the two worlds before we even knew that we were going to be acquired by an Italian company. But nothing planned right now. We're like I said, we're focusing very in Maryland, but if there's any ideas about how to incorporate the two, I'm all ears.
What's the Amaro, out of curiosity? I love Amaro.
Yeah, so it's called Sagamore Amaro, and it's very. I mean, it's in markets, but it didn't go out too far. But I think it turned out really well. Amaros are an interesting category. They can be very like either bitter to sweet, and it leaves a lot of room for creativity. And so ours is a kind of, I would say, sarsaparilla forward, a little bit more on the bitter side with kind of a sweet backing to it. It's not overly sweet like a Nonino or some of those ones. Yeah, it's pretty balanced and interesting. I don't know if our new Italian company came in and they were like, "That's a great Amaro." They were kind of like, "What is this? It's an American Amaro." But
Di Serono, I'm like, what is the Italian influence? That flew over my head. Sorry.
Exactly. No,
he's paying more attention than I am.
Yeah. Good. That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, I'll add it to the list of bottles that I need you to send me because I want to try.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Stephen M asks, does we kind of talked this a little bit, but this is, I think his question is a little bit more specific. Does different rye from different regions make a difference on the aging process? For example, does one region need 4+ years to get the youthful taste gone, and another might need 6+ years?
So I don't know if it's technically the rye and the aging process. It might be the rye and the varietal. There are several varieties of rye out there. There's what they call a VNS, or variety not stated. Then there's Brasetto, there's Serafino, there's Donco. There's a handful of them out there, and I think they all will impart some slightly different flavors into the whiskey. There's not a ton of research out there to tie rye and what that flavor profile in whiskey is, as much as there is around corn or bourbons. It's something we want to continue to develop and understand and better kind of move, especially as we grow and continue to plant rye. But absolutely, I think rye varietals will change the flavor. I don't know if that'll change the aging as much as like just the conditions that it's aging in or the environment that it's aging in.
Josh, I don't know if it's Cessier or Sessler. Sorry, my eyes are terrible. Is there a reason why we typically don't see it as common with ryes having longer age statements versus like bourbons and scotches? I know there are some that, Sazerac 18-year comes to mind. But typically I think you see bourbon and scotch age much longer than rye. Is there a specific reason for that?
Yeah, so I mean, I have my personal opinion that I will share that like I said, I think rye has kind of this sweet spot in that 6 to 10 year range. Outside of that, it's not getting worse, but it's not really getting a lot better. And you're sometimes mellowing out these flavors that I appreciate in rye. Some of those, baking spice forward flavors that you're getting will mellow out a little bit more, where I kind of appreciate those. And it's just like diminishing returns. It's like I said, it's not getting a lot better. It's not getting worse, but you're losing whiskey to evaporation. Whereas I also think rye will age a little bit quicker than bourbons. You taste young bourbons and they can taste green. They can taste very grainy or corn forward. And they will continue to mellow and mature and meld together over time, which is why you see them at 15, 20 years, because that profile will continue to get better over time. Whereas, like I said, I think rye, not that there aren't good 15 or 12-year-old ryes out there. It's just they're harder to find.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, the longer it ages in the barrel, the more barrel characteristic you're going to get, and I can see that point for sure. Rich Martinez says, "What's your favorite Sagamore whiskey?"
So of our core lineup, I would say my favorite is our Double Oak rye whiskey. It's available everywhere in every market. And I think it's really, really fantastic. It definitely showcases rye, but also puts this kind of really nice oak toasted marshmallow finish on it. So we took our 4 to 6 year old rye whiskey, we dumped that, put it into brand new American oak barrels that were actually called wave stave barrels from Independent Stave, where they actually cut grooves in the staves lengthwise to increase the surface area. They did a number 1 char and a light to medium toast on them. And so we aged the whiskey in there for an additional 18 months to really take on some of that flavor from the barrel. And it puts this very nice, not overly woody, not overly oak forward, but like I said, it has like a nice toasted sweetness to it. It's a mix of those 2 different rye mash bills into the barrel. And I think it's a really, really nice rye whiskey. It's probably my favorite of our core, and then of our finished products that we've offered, my favorite is probably a cognac. We do a cognac finish, and I think cognac blends so well with rye, with that kind of toffee, those like cookie flavors. Those things go really, really nicely with rye whiskey.
Awesome. I'm going to ask a couple more questions here, and then we'll choose some favorites. All right. Caroline asks, how does the unique climate and soil of Maryland influence the maturation process of Sagamore Spirits rye whiskey? And how does this compare to other rye whiskeys aged in different regions?
Yeah, again, I think it kind of comes down to that climate and the environment and how it's aged. Again, like I said, we do non-climate controlled aging barns on the bilge, not palletized. So they get a lot of flow. They get a lot of that heat and that airflow through them. And that is going to differ if you're in a colder climate or a hot only climate where you're not getting colder. That can kind of force more evaporation and different flavor profiles. So you do see these major changes from winters to summers here in Maryland, and I think that definitely benefits the aging process.
Thanks. JC Solace, I'm always butchering people's names. I apologize. Considering your expertise in the beer industry, do you think about partnerships with breweries to release? She said Firestone recently released a partnership whiskey. Like, is there any local Maryland breweries that you guys work with? I'm sure they hit you up for barrels and stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually do partner with a couple local ones. One local one called Monument City. They do a wood stove, which is an imperial stout. And so we send them barrels, they age that. Imperial stouts just go really well. They're very chocolate forward. That mixes so well with rye whiskey. We actually did a national release with Sierra Nevada several years ago where we sent them barrels. They aged a rye specific mash bill or recipe into our barrels and then sent the barrels back to us. And then they released a beer that was a Sagamore Sierra Nevada beer. And we released a whiskey aged in those same barrels. And beer is always an interesting one. I like to stick to those kind of those stouts, those, flavors that are going to benefit it. I think, you go into other flavor like IPAs and stuff and they don't work as well. But there are a handful that we've done. We did one with a Chicago brewery as well. That again, a big stout that imparted a lot of nice, like malted chocolate notes to it that I think work well with rye whiskey.
Cool. Yeah. We do partner. We get whiskey barrels from a lot of people, and you said that, and I'm going to do a little bit of promotion here, but if you're part of the whiskey club, we are going to be, you don't have to be part of the whiskey club for this, but we collabed with a brewery 10 years ago named Bottle Logic in Anaheim, California. And we brewed a beer with them called Fundamental Observation 10 years ago. And that Fundamental Observation is a synonym for Eureka. That's where that name came from. And this year is the 10-year anniversary of that project. So we gave them a bunch of barrels last year, and we're releasing an exclusive beer for Eureka and Bottle Logic called Apotheosis, which is kind of like an ode to the first brew of Fundamental Observation. And we'll be doing a beer and food dinner at the end of August. So we'll be announcing more details soon on that. But exciting, we love the relationship between the beer industry and the whiskey industry. It's a special bond. I got one more question for you, and then we'll choose some favorites. I know it's late there, so thank you very much again for staying up for us. Andrew Bemis wants to know, with the recent acquisition, what's the thing that makes you most excited about this partnership? And have you started on a Di Serrano finished rye yet?
No, we have not, but we've talked about it. So Di Serrano makes a Marsala as well. And so it's something I think will work very well with rye. It's got those fig notes, that sweetness. I think there's a lot of fun with it. My only concern is the consumer's understanding or knowledge of what a Marsala is, and is it a wine that I want to drink? Is it a whiskey that I want to have that's finished in it? But yeah, I'm really excited about the partnership. I think they come in equally as passionate. They're a company that's been around for 500 years. And like I said, still family owned, which I appreciate. And they've really just come in and said, keep doing what you're doing. We believe in what you're doing. There's a reason we purchased this company is because we want to continue to tell this story. and they listen to us. They listen to our advice. When we switched from our former straight rye whiskey to what is now our small batch rye whiskey and up the proof by 10 proof points, I thought it was something that we were going to have to fight them on. And they said, absolutely, that makes total sense. And agreed to hold the price on it. So I think there's a lot of really great value and knowledge that they're going to bring to our team. And again, just help us to reach new markets and to get to new consumers that we weren't able to do ahead of time. So,
have you got to go to Italy yet?
I did. I went. I went last fall for our budget season. And so Saronno is about 40 minutes north of
in Italy. Oh, come on.
Right. Saronno is a more of an industrial city, about 40 minutes north of Milan, but I spent a little time in Milan and then went up to Saronno and met the team and got a tour of their facilities. And so, yeah, it's something that I'm very fortunate to be a part of.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. We're going to run through these questions really quick. You choose the 3 you like best, and then I'll choose the winners.
Cool.
We got the question about the label and the shape of the bottle. We got the question about transitioning from the brewery to the distillery and what have you enjoyed most. We got the question about the colder weather and does it affect or do you do any temperature control? Let's see here. We got the question about the cocktail. What's your favorite cocktail with Sagamore? What does Sagamore mean? That question. We had the question about continuing to honor Maryland and the Italian influence with the Di Serrano partnership. We had the question about age statements and using different rye from different regions. We had the question about is there any reason we don't see longer age statements on ryes versus bourbon and scotches? Sorry, 1 second. What's your favorite whiskey from Sagamore out of the lineup? We had the question about the unique climate and soil of Maryland and the maturation process. And then, sorry, a lot of questions. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of questions. Yeah.
What we had the question about the acquisition and have you started a rye, a Di Serrano finished rye? The partnership, the question about the partnership with breweries, and then I think that was it. So out of those questions, which ones were your top 3?
Great. Great questions. I love answering questions, and it shows that people are interested. But I'd say label and bottle shape, longer age on rye compared to, or why is there not a longer age on rye compared to bourbons? I thought that was a great question. And then the brewery partnerships. That's always a fun one.
All right, so run them by me again. So we have the brewery partnerships. We have the
age statements on rye.
Yep. Why isn't rye aged longer? And what was the third one?
And then the label, what's behind the label and bottle design and shape.
Okay, so I'm going to give third place to the label design and shape. So we'll go back and look at these questions. I got someone in the background taking down all this. So Mark Horowitz, you're going to get the Sagamore 93, the first distillate coming from Maryland. Second place, I'm going to give to the brewery question. So I really enjoyed that. That's something we've been doing for a while. So that will go to JC, just to JC, because I don't know how to pronounce your last name, sir. Yeah. You'll have to message me and tell me the pronunciation so I don't butcher it moving forward. But thank you. Great question. And then first place, I really like that question about why why isn't rye aged longer compared to bourbon and scotch? So you're going to get that bottle that Ryan just showed, which is the Distiller Select, signed by Ryan, that finished in port barrels that won Best Rye Whiskey in the World at the 2019 San Francisco Spirit Awards. So, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. I know we didn't get to meet up in Tails, but hopefully we can meet one day soon. And thank you for delicious rye whiskey. And I'm pretty sure this bottle is going to be gone when I go upstairs. So thank you again and have a good night.
Cheers, Trevor. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, everyone. Appreciate it.